Hey everyone, it's Tyler from Zephyr Epic here, and welcome to our 2024-25 Upper Deck Series 1 Young Guns review checklist breakdown. In this video, we are going to be going over all 49 Young Guns that will be available in 2024-25 Upper Deck Series 1 that comes out next week on October 16th, and kind of giving you our thoughts on them, what their kind of outlook is, how the overall crop is, and kind of just a little bit of details about all of the players. This format is going to be the exact same as last year, where we have the same letter grade guide where A is a first line forward, top 5 defenseman, or elite goalie. B is a top 6 forward, top 2 defenseman, or a starting goalie. C plus is a top 9 forward, a top 4 defenseman that can score, or a tandem goalie. C is kind of a bottom 6 forward or a bottom 4 defenseman. C minus is a 4th line forward or bottom pairing defenseman or a backup goalie. And then D is kind of a replacement level player, someone who might play some NHL games and AHL games, but realistically will never get a ton of hobby love. One important caveat is that this grading is done from a hobby value standpoint and what I think each player's realistic upside is if they hit as an NHLer. The main thing that drives hobby value is points, specifically goals and flashiness or highlight reel plays, as well as the market the player plays in. For example, a Montreal Canadiens player will typically be more valuable than a Tampa Bay Lightning player if they're relatively equal in the terms of their play. Also, typically defensemen have a lower value than a forward, even if they're more impactful on the game, just because they don't score as much, and that is the main thing that drives hobby value. One final note is around goaltenders. Typically for goalies, my suggestions are always to keep one of each goalie that you realistically think could be a backup at any point throughout their NHL career, because if they do get thrust into a playoff spot and pop off during the playoffs, goalie values tend to skyrocket the most, and so yeah, it's always worth having a couple extra ones kicking around because you never know who's going to be the next Jordan Binnington. This video is going to be broken up into timestamps for each individual team, so if you want to go ahead and skip to your favorite team, feel free to use the timestamps in the description below. Or if you want to just go ahead and skip to the top 10, which I know some of you like to do, you can go ahead and click on that timestamp in the comment section below, and that'll have the top 10 as well as our entire review of all of the players. All right, let's kick things off with one of the strongest teams in the product in the Anaheim Ducks. Anaheim has two really strong young guns with Cutter Gauthier and Olen Zellweger. Gauthier gets an A from me, and after refusing to sign with the Flyers, he found himself in Anaheim and is looking to be a part of their really highly talented young center core that already has Leo Carlsson, Mason McTavish, and Trevor Zegras. I think he's got legit top line upside, but there is some chance that he gets a little buried in the lineup to start his pro career, just because again, they've got a lot of talent up front. Olen Zellweger had an incredibly solid transition to pro hockey last year. He crushed his games at the AHL level and continued to show that he's got legit top pairing upside at the NHL level in the 26 games he played last year. The only reason Zellweger isn't an A is because he's a defender and they traditionally have a lower hobby value. And again, I actually think he's going to be one of the more impactful NHL players from this crop. It's just, unfortunately, he's a defenseman and not in a major market team, so that's going to hurt his value. In terms of hobby value, I think Sam Colangelo is going to end up around the C plus tier, as he'll end up being buried behind the plethora of riches that the Anaheim Ducks have up front, but I wouldn't be shocked to see him carve out a middle 6 role with the Ducks. He wasn't the most prolific scorer in college, but did have an initial strong stint in pro hockey last year, putting up 4 points in 4 games at the AHL level and 1 goal in 3 games at the NHL level. The hockey club formerly known as the Arizona Coyotes and now the Utah Hockey Club is 3 young guns in the set. Just as a note, I kept them as the Arizona Coyotes for the video just because that is what they are listed as on the checklist, but their main one that you really want to pay attention to is Josh Doan. I think he's got fringe top 6 upside. He had a really hot start to his NHL career with 9 points in 11 games, but I think you're likely to see him more realistically net out as a middle 6 forward, probably a 3rd line scorer in Utah. Matt Villalta had a pretty strong AHL season last year for a good Tucson team, but ultimately I think his upside is more limited to that of a 3rd stringer. And then Cameron Crotty has never been a scoring defender throughout his entire career, and while he did make his NHL debut last season, I think he'll wind up as a tweener at best. Next up are the Boston Bruins, and they just have a single young gun in the set in Justin Brazeau. I think he's kind of going to be just a really solid bottom 6 forward with some scoring upside, but it is the Bruins, so maybe they'll find a way to get even more out of him. For the first time in what seems like forever, the Buffalo Sabres actually don't have a single young gun in a flagship series product. The Calgary Flames have a single young gun in the set in Yan Kuznetsov, who is a defenseman that will likely get a shot in the Calgary Flames lineup later this season, but he doesn't score enough for a defender to warrant any hobby love. Next up are the Carolina Hurricanes, who are led by Bradley Nadeau. Bradley Nadeau is a right winger who had a really strong freshman season at the University of Maine. He's going to probably spend some time in the AHL adjusting to the level of pro hockey before transitioning to an NHL regular for the Carolina Hurricanes, but he's got legit top 6 upside and is on a team that typically develops their prospects and players well. In fact, I wouldn't be shocked if he is one of the biggest sleepers of the set. Scott Morrow has been one of the highest scoring blue line prospects over the past few seasons, which should be a good thing for his hobby value. The only issue is that he's on a super deep Carolina blue line and will likely be stuck in the AHL until an injury happens or he forces their hand to play him in the lineup. The Chicago Blackhawks have 3 young guns in the set, and they're led by Frank Nazar, who I think has a legit top line upside that could land him next to Connor Bedard if he transitions to the wing in Chicago. I think it's a decent bet that he'll be an everyday NHLer. It's just more of a who will he play with question, as if any Chicago player develops chemistry with Bedard, they'll likely see a huge bump in their value, and Frank Nazar could be one of those players. I don't think Ethan Del Mastro has quite enough of an offensive punch needed to generate some hobby love, but he should be able to carve out a decent NHL career as a middle pairing defender. As of right now, I don't think Landon Slaggert has the offensive profile needed to push him into the top 6 or middle 6 tier, but he definitely does have the work ethic needed to carve out a bottom 6 role, which is why he gets a C-. The Colorado Avalanche have a single young gun in the set in Jason Poland. Poland's had a bit of a rougher transition scoring-wise to pro hockey and likely nets out as an NHL-AHL tweener with a bit of offensive upside. Again, he did score a lot in college, he just hasn't been able to translate that success to his first couple seasons in pro hockey, so he probably is in like the D+ tier, but I gave him a D just because after a full season and given his age, it's likely that he'll probably stick in that NHL-AHL tweener spot. The Columbus Blue Jackets have 3 young guns in the set in Gavin Brindley, Luca Del Bel Belluz, and James Malatesta. Brindley, I think, has the highest upside of them all. He's a very strong skater who should be able to be a consistent scorer at the NHL level and should get some opportunity in Columbus as they look to continue their rebuild. I think he's got legit middle 6, if not top 6 upside there, so that's why he gets a B grade from me. I think Del Bel Belluz will net out as a 3rd line scoring forward, but there is at least some potential for him to be something more. His biggest obstacle is just Columbus's deep prospect pool. Like Del Bel Belluz, I think there's some upside to Malatesta's game, but that he's likely going to net out as a bottom 6 forward at the NHL level. He should at least be able to carve out a decent NHL career thanks to his skills and work ethic. Next up are the Dallas Stars, who have 2 very strong young guns in the set. Headlining the set is Logan Stankoven, who gets an A+ from me. He has first line upside, elite score potential written all over him. Had a really solid rookie campaign. Actually, technically this year's also his rookie campaign, so he's vying for the Calder, but in his limited NHL action last year, he was absolutely phenomenal. He started off the season really well, and yeah, there's really just not much more to say other than he's insanely fun to watch, really highly skilled, and should be a big part of that Dallas Stars team. Along with Logan Stankoven, the Dallas Stars also have Maverick Bourque, who led the AHL in scoring as a 21-year-old last season, and by all accounts should be an NHL regular with some legit top-line upside given his track record. He's starting off the season with a bit of an injury, but he should be getting a chance in Dallas's top 6 this season once he's fully healthy. Next up are a trio of teams that don't have any young guns in the set, including the Detroit Red Wings, the Edmonton Oilers, and the Florida Panthers. Akil Thomas is the lone young gun for the LA Kings, and I really liked his game back when he was with the Niagara Ice Dogs in the OHL, but he struggled a little bit to transition to the pro level during his first 3 AHL seasons. He made big strides last year and looks like he's earned himself a spot with the Kings NHL roster this year. I think he tops out as a 3rd line scorer, but there is a chance he works his way a little higher in the lineup if everything clicks. The Minnesota Wild are a pretty strong team in 2024-25 Upper Deck Series 1, and they're led by Jesper Wallstedt, who is one of my personal favorite goalie prospects. I think that there's a chance he'll be one of the top 10 goalies over the next decade in the NHL, which is why he gets an A grade from me. He's just simply really good and has been at every single level he's played at. Murat Kuznetsov is an excellent two-way player who has a bit of pop in his game and put up some decent point totals in the KHL as a 20 and 21-year-old forward. I think he nets out as a reliable middle 6 forward, but could see a world where he turns into a top 6 forward due to his defensive abilities. Between Liam Ogren and Kuznetsov, I think Ogren has a little bit more upside to be a more impact scorer at the NHL level, but I think his floor is also a little lower. Both of them should carve out solid NHL careers for the Wild. Like the Minnesota Wild, the Montreal Canadiens also have 3 really strong young guns, and they're led by Lane Hutson, who I ranked as my top young gun in the set. He is one of the most dynamic blue liners in hockey, and I think he's going to thrive in Montreal. It's a perfect spot for him as they're going to give him opportunities to learn, grow, and fine-tune his game at the NHL level this season, and it wouldn't shock me to see him be a potential Norris candidate over the course of his NHL career just due to his shiftiness and overall skill level. Joshua Waugh has been one of the biggest risers from the 2021 draft class and has quickly turned into a player who could be an impact NHLer after an impressive first season in pro hockey. I think Logan Mayhew's ceiling is a decent second pairing defender who will make some gaffes that frustrate fans. I don't know if his scoring upside is enough to get a ton of hobby love, especially when the Habs have Hutson and potentially Reinbacher to get all of the power play opportunities. So that's why he gets a C+. He's kind of right between a B- and a C+ for me. So it's just a tough spot for him, and if he's on a different team, maybe that changes things, but also again, the Habs value is going to bump him up. So yeah, probably like a C++, but he gets a C+ for me for now. The Nashville Predators don't have any young guns in the set, but the New Jersey Devils do. Graham Clark's actually had better production at the AHL level than he had through his CHL career, and while this is a good sign for his development, I still think he nets out as a bottom 6 forward at best, which is why he gets a C from me. The New York Islanders have 2 young guns in the set, including Ruslan Ishakov and Kyle McLean. Ishakov had an interesting development path going from the MHL to the NCAA to the Liga to the DEL to the AHL before making his NHL debut last year. The 24-year-old had good AHL production with a ton of skill in his game, but is ultimately returned to the KHL this season. There's definitely some skill and potential there, but he may never come back to the NHL, so it's tough to really place a pulse on his value. I think Kyle McLean will carve out a role on the Islanders due to them having no real prospects, but he's never been a prolific scorer, and that's something you need to do to drive hobby value, which is why he gets a C- from me. The New York Rangers have 2 pretty intriguing young guns in the set in Brennan Othmann and Matt Rempe. Othmann plays a pretty chippy game while being able to produce a decent amount offensively, and he's got a good enough underlying statistical profile that warrants some top 6 upside. I will say that Othmann kind of seems like he'll be the 7th best forward on the team, like a really good third liner. I just don't know if he has quite enough pop to be a second liner, but it's there, and there's enough of his game that I really like that I think he can reach that, so that's why I gave him a B over a B-. While I think Matt Rempe is going to have a lot of value initially, I just don't think he's particularly good enough to have a long NHL career, nor does his playstyle bode well for a long, healthy career either. The upside in his game is essentially that he's an enforcer cult hero, and ultimately he'll probably be a very good pull day 1 value-wise, but as time goes on, I think he'll just end up dropping in value pretty quickly as more of his cards start coming out and the novelty wears off, so that's why he gets a C+ from me. Realistically, I would probably rank someone of his stature in a C- tier just for context. I do think, again, day 1 he's going to be in the top 10, maybe even the top 5 sellers just because of the novelty of the player type that he is and the nostalgia that it brings. But again, I think long term that value is just going to tank. Zach Ostapchuk is the lone young gun for the Ottawa Senators. I think if Ostapchuk turns into an NHL regular, his upside is a third liner who is a pain to play against. He doesn't have the scoring profile to really warrant a top 6 role, but he does have the work ethic and game that should see him carve out a few seasons at the NHL level in a team's bottom 6. Next up are the Philadelphia Flyers, who have 1 young gun in Ivan Fedotov. Fedotov is a 6'8" Russian netminder who had a very turbulent path to the NHL, but he's finally with the Flyers, and hopefully he'll be able to settle down now that he has some stability with where he'll be playing. There is some talent there as he has had some decent save percentage stats in the KHL, but it's more likely he'll be used as a 1B behind Samuel Ersson this season, and I think long term he kind of projects as a secondary tandem goalie. Next up are the Pittsburgh Penguins, who have 1 young gun in the set in Jack St. Ivany. He's a defender without much scoring upside, so unfortunately he ends up with a D grade. Unfortunately for you Sharks fans, you're going to have to wait till either Series 2 or Extended Series for both Will Smith and Macklin Celebrini to get their young guns. However, you do have 2 young guns in the set in Shakir Mukhamadullin and Colin Graff. Mukhamadullin is a 6'4" blue liner that has some offensive upside and has generally been really solid at the AHL level for an under 23 defender. He's got a chance to be a top 4 defender with some offensive upside, and he should get a lot of opportunity to achieve that as San Jose continues their rebuild. Colin Graff is an undrafted college free agent who has the ability to score but likely projects as a middle 6 forward option if he hits at the NHL level, which is why he gets a C grade from me. The Seattle Kraken have no young guns in the set, but the St. Louis Blues have 2 debut in Zachary Bolduc and Zach Dean. Zachary Bolduc has scored at a solid rate in his first pro season and gives you some glimpses of top 6 upside, but ultimately I think he might find himself caught behind a few other Blues players, which is why he gets a B- from me. I think Zach Dean has a little bit more offensive pop in his game than what he showed in his first pro season last year, but ultimately I think he'll end up as more of a bottom 6 grinder who can chip in from time to time, probably like, a plus 4th line, good 3rd line forward. The Tampa Bay Lightning have 3 young guns in 2024-25 Upper Deck Series 1, including Gage Gonsalves, Emil Lilleberg, and Maxwell Crozier. Gonsalves has worked hard and grinded his way through the WHL and AHL before making his NHL debut in Tampa Bay last season. He's gotten better every season, and there's enough reason to believe he could carve out a solid 3rd line role in the NHL. Lilleberg is a 6'2" Norwegian blue liner who had a solid first stint in the NHL last year. He has a little bit of offensive upside, but just not enough to ever warrant hobby value. However, I will say he lays some really hard hits out there, so keep your head up if you're on the ice against him. Like Lilleberg, Maxwell Crozier had a decent first full pro season, but his offensive upside is also somewhat limited. Both might turn out to be solid NHL defenders, but I doubt either gets to the level needed to generate hobby value. Next up are the Toronto Maple Leafs, who have a lone young gun in the set in Marshall Rafai. Rafai is a hard-nosed defender who will likely end up as a 6th, 7th defender that endears himself to whatever team he plays for. Given that that team might be the Leafs, there's a chance he could get some hobby value even if he doesn't hit the score sheet a ton. The Vancouver Canucks also have one young gun in the set, and his value might shock some people who aren't familiar with them because Archie Bains is a very popular player in Vancouver. He had a terrific second pro season in the AHL playing at a near point per game pace, and he's not the flashiest player, but he does a lot of the little things really well and generally endears himself to his coaches and teammates through his hard work. He's a player who has constantly faced adversity throughout his career. He wasn't drafted into the WHL and wasn't drafted into the NHL, but worked really hard to get to where he is. Given that he's improved pretty much every single season he has played hockey, there is some reason to believe he has some top 6 upside. I just think the more realistic landing spot for him is a really solid 3rd line forward who can move up in the lineup if there is an injury. The Vegas Golden Knights have 3 young guns in the set, including Brennan Brisson, Lucas Cormier, and Mason Morelli. Of the 3, I think Brisson has the most potential to be someone that has a lot of hobby value, but he is entering his 3rd pro season, and this is probably one of the biggest make it or break it seasons for any player in this list. His production stalled in the AHL last season, but his 15-game stint with Vegas at the NHL level was solid enough to ease those production concerns, and I think he's got legit top 6 upside, but it's kind of at a prove it point, and he'll look to do that with Vegas to begin the 2024-25 NHL season. Lucas Cormier is a 22-year-old blue liner who put up generally impressive offensive numbers throughout his QMJHL career, including a 30-goal season. He's entering his 3rd pro season now, and I think there's a chance he ends up as a solid second pairing blue liner with some offensive upside, but I think it's going to involve the right coach at the right time, so it's a bit of a longer shot than it should be, which is why he nets out as a C+. Mason Morelli is a 28-year-old forward that worked his way up through the ECHL and AHL over the years to make his NHL debut last year, but at this point he's likely a tweener at best. The Washington Capitals have a single young gun in the set in Pierre-Eric Dubé. He is an undersized 23-year-old winger who has put up respectable numbers at the AHL level. I think if he makes the NHL full-time, it'll be as a middle 6 scoring forward, but I think his size and style of game will make it hard for him to truly break through, which is why he gets a C from me. And wrapping things up are the Winnipeg Jets, who have 2 pretty intriguing prospects themselves with Brad Lambert and Nikita Chibrikov. Lambert is one of the most boom or bust prospects on this checklist. A couple of seasons prior to his draft year, he was being touted as a possible first overall selection, so there's a lot of skill and talent there. While he didn't end up turning into one, he still found himself being picked in the 1st round by the Winnipeg Jets, and he had a terrific first pro season with the Manitoba Moose. It looks like the Winnipeg Jets will try to let him build on that season in the AHL to start the year until he forces his way into the lineup. He's got all of the tools to be a potential top line player, he just hasn't really been able to put it together consistently enough yet to demand that opportunity. So he gets a B+ from me, but he is one of the players that could either go into the A tier or fall all the way down to like a C-. Chibrikov has a lot of offensive talent to his game as well, but needs to solidify his overall game in order to really break through at the NHL level. If he makes it, it'll likely be as a middle 6 scoring winger. In terms of my top 10 for the set, I have Lane Hutson 1, Logan Stankoven at number 2, Jesper Wallstedt at number 3, Cutter Gauthier at number 4, Bradley Nadeau at 5, Olin Zellweger at 6, Frank Nazar at 7, Maverick Bourque at 8, Brad Lambert at 9, and Gavin Brindley at 10, with the note that I think Matt Rempe will easily be a top 10 value Young Guns at release, but will likely rapidly decrease in value over time as he kind of wears off the novelty of being that cult hero enforcer. I think the biggest sleeper in the set is going to be Bradley Nadeau, just simply because he's not playing in a major market and he's not going to be in the NHL to start right away, but there is a ton of talent there, and again, Carolina is generally really good at developing their players, so I have a lot of faith in them developing into a legit top 6 option, and he might be kind of like Jason Robertson was at the start of 2020-21, where it's a guy that has a really good track record and people kind of sleep on them, but all of a sudden he just pops out of nowheres and his value skyrockets. So he is my pick for the sleeper of the set. I think there's a pretty big drop off after the B+ and B tiers. A lot of the B- players have the tools to be fringe top 6 players, but it's going to require absolutely perfect circumstances and them hitting their absolute peak. So I think most of them will probably project to be third liners instead, but I just wanted a bit of a distinction between the players who I think have an outside chance of reaching that and players who I think are going to be locked into more of that third line, second pairing defensive type role. Overall, though, it's a pretty solid crop with 2 decent headliners in Stankoven and Hutson, who should be 2 of the top 5 rookies, if not 2 of the top 3 for the entire 24-25 hockey card rookie crop. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a like or a comment, as it really helps us out, and if you've got any questions, feel free to let us know. I read through every single comment we get on the channel. So again, if you've got any, please let me know. Also, if you are looking to pick up a box of 2024-25 Upper Deck Series 1, there will be a link in the description for you to pre-order them. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next week for the release of 2024-25 Upper Deck Series 1. Take care.